Hey, Mr. Pond Boss,
Going
tell me
live.
what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello, everybody. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live from the balmy hills of North Texas, Pond Boss World Headquarters. There's Jason Nepstead. Of course he's there. That's what Jason does. He loves this show. Jason, you could probably do this show. In fact, I know you could. Hey, there's Fred Bingham and Mike Cottrell. Good to see you guys. Let's talk about some fun stuff. Like how to fine tune your pond. There's Jacob West, birthday boy. Happy birthday to Jacob. Jacob is like 29 today or something. How old are you, Jacob? Never mind. Yeah, you want to tell us. Let us know. John Funk from Chili Mid, Michigan. You know, John sent a question a while ago. He says, what if we never reach summer temperatures? Well, then I'm moving there because it was really hot here today. Of course, if you're going to live in Texas, you're going to have a thing called summer. But when you live over there where you do in Michigan, you're going to have a thing called winter. So let's see here. Let me see what we got. We got Brian Lawrence, and maybe Jason can get a participation trophy. You already get a participation trophy, dude. A first place active biology trophy. Let's see here. 35. Jacob is 35 years old. Chuck Brinkman. Hey there. You guys know the drill. I don't even know why we talk about it, but I'm gonna hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comments section. Click like. Share this video right now. Share it to your timeline, and let's get into talking about some pond stuff. Daniel Powell sent me a question in my email about 20 minutes ago. He's from Laurinburg, North Carolina. Works with I think a preacher that has a lake over there, a nice lake, and they evaluate it, stock some fish. And here's what he said. And you know what? This will be kind of fun. I'm going to let you guys come up with some answers. So I'm going to pitch the question out there, and then you guys start answering the question. Just tell me what you do. I know what I do, but I'm going to see what you do. Look at there. John Henry sharing this thing. There's Carrie Martin checking in from Myrtle Beach. Carrie, that's good. You may want to chime in on this question here. John Funk, 66 degrees at the moment, down to the mid-50s tonight with a promise of the 70s. Well, we are in a tornado watch. Our temperature today was about 97. Whatever the heat factor they call it, felt like it was 107, and it sure did feel like it. Chad Gillespie's got, is there a good way to control the snake population in a pond or lake? Do snakes eat enough fish to affect the fish population? Well, you know what, Chad? I give them their Second Amendment rights. Now, most people are going to tell you that, and people in the know, and I concur with this some, but if I'm out in the wild and I come across a cottonmouth water moccasin, I'm probably going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave rattlesnakes alone. I'm going to leave all snakes alone in the wild. But if they're around my house, where my grandkids are, if it's a water snake, I'm going to shoot it. If it's a poisonous snake, I'm going to shoot it because I don't want my children or grandchildren around that. So you choose what you're going to do. But can they affect a fish population? No, they really can't. Now, I see Jason Luster. Jason, you might want to, I'm going to pose a question here in a minute for everybody to answer. Michael Eric from Iowa. Chris Miller, any negative side effects to PVC structure? You know what? I'll get on that here in a minute. That's good. That's a good one. The answer is no. But there's a lot of good side effects. There's no bad ones, really. Controlling the snake population, and do they have an impact to affect fish? I tell you when I've seen snakes affect the fish population is at a fish hatchery. When I first got into the fisheries business, I leased a fish farm back in 1980. And I didn't realize how many fish snakes ate. But I had 50,000 catfish fingerlings in a 3-acre pond for a short period of time. And there were a bunch of snakes, which I knew, but I didn't really see them during the daytime until one night I went out there. And oh my gosh, they were wadded up in a ball. So I went back, got a shotgun, and had a Q-beam spotlight, and I started busting them, cutting them open. And every single snake had 6 to 12 4 to 6 inch channel catfish fingerlings in its gullet. And the 6 weeks we had those 50,000 catfish in there, we got 45,000 back. They ate 5,000 fish. But in a healthy, balanced fishing pond, snakes are not going to hurt the population of fish at all. But in the swimming pond by my house, we're going to shoot every one of them. I don't want them there. It's a choice. So I see Mike Rosa, TJ Grogan, John Wilson. Good to see you guys tonight. So here's the question that Daniel Powell sent me. Now, this is in Laurinburg, North Carolina. He says, I won't be able to attend the show tonight, but I'll watch it later and wondering if you can answer a question. Since we stocked brim, coppernose bluegill, and shellcracker last year, we've seen a boom of small fish this year. The pond owner enjoys feeding the fish from his dock, which is close to the area where most of the swimming and playing occurs. We're having a problem with the fish swarming around and even biting swimmers. Is there a way to discourage this? Is netting off an area to keep fish out feasible? Thanks for all your help, Daniel Powell. All right, give me some answers to that. If we get 4 or 5 guys answering that question, and if it's different than mine, I'll tell you what mine is in a minute. All right, so let's say here, Chris Miller, any negative side effects to PVC? No, there's really not. I actually love PVC pipe structure because it does something. Now, if you're going to use it, I'll tell you what, take the time to get some really heavy grit sandpaper and rough it up, because what that does is that makes biofilm paraphyte more adhesive to the PVC. And one of the things I love about PVC is you can fish it and not likely to get hung up. And if it's dense enough, you're going to attract quite a few small fish. So I don't know of any negative side effects of PVC. Kerry Martin hates copper-headed rattle moccasins. Yep, so do we. Although, if I come across a velvet tail rattlesnake, I think they're pretty cool. And they're non-aggressive, and they're protected in Texas, but they're not protected in Oklahoma. But I think snakes have a place, and it's not around my house. Unless it's, I've relocated rat snakes before. The garden snakes, I'll leave those alone. I don't care. Most of the time we see a rat snake, it's migrating. And most of the time a water snake comes up close to the house, it's in the rut, which is about right now. So you're likely to see more snake movement now than you will in the next 3 or 4 months because they're mating. Once they get through mating, they're going to focus on feeding. Sheridan Ashmore, good evening. Looks like Leanne's checking in. Holy cow, we got 18 new comments. I better catch up. Chad Gillespie, while pouring water out of my canoe, I had 3 water moccasins under it coiled up. I don't like surprises like that. You know what? I'm right there with you. I don't like surprises like that. What I figured out when I had that very first fish farm back in my early 20s, I was petrified every time I saw a snake. It just spooked the snot out of me, and I hated it. So I made up my mind I was not going to live in fear of snakes. So I took some time. This is before Al Gore invented the internet. Nobody had a cell phone. There was no Google. If somebody said that word, they look at you like you lost your mind. So I spent time at the library. I called people that I could find that knew about snakes, and I educated myself. So now when I'm coming to a canoe, I'm assuming there's a snake under it. So I'm coming prepared that there's going to be a snake under it. What am I going to do about it? So now when I'm in their habitat, I'm aware. I'm just not afraid. I just know that they could be there. TJ Grogan's got it. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Let's see here. Jennifer Ardoin. Kerry Martin. I've only seen a large amount of snakes in ponds with a large population of bullfrogs. That's probably true. But if you've got a large population of small fish, we're going to see snakes. And we get those. There's Pat Williamson checking in from Oakwood. John Funk's answer is to move the feeder. So in other words, what John Funk is saying is stop feeding the fish where you're swimming. Anybody else? Oh, look at that. Kerry Martin feeding a different location. I love that. Tommy Davis checking in. Hey, Tommy. Good to see you, buddy. Tim Pelichek. I bought a place an hour and a half north of Houston with a 1.5 acre pond. The water is dark and clear. In the first 2 fishing adventures, we only caught 1 fish, about a 5-pound bass. The pond is 30 years old. Any suggestions on how to get the fishing better? Sure. Clayton Bounds, howdy Bob, Mark Dyer, Kerry Martin, Herman Brothers have the worst biting bluegill. I've experienced them first. So I have too. I'll tell you all that story here in a minute. Let's go back to Tim's question. Tim is, if that pond is 30 years old and it's not been managed, well, first of all, decide how you want it to be. Do you want to catch big numbers of small fish? You want to catch a wide variety of fish? Do you want it just to be healthy? How do you want it to be? Then assess it. Now, in the upcoming issue of Pond Boss Magazine in July, August, which this is the May, June issue, by the way, $35 a year, folks. Please subscribe to Pond Boss. That's the economy that fuels everything about Pond Boss. The website, the magazine, this show. Of course, we do have, and I want to thank our sponsors, Texas Hunter Products and Purina Mills Fish Food. So, you guys subscribing to the magazine motivates sponsors to want to pay money to be able to provide these services. So, if you have a friend or a neighbor that has a pond, let me know. We'll send them a sample copy of the magazine, put a little letter in there, tell them that you wanted them to have it. Let us know. Send us an address. Speaking of that, if you do the hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, click like and share, you're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug. And we just got a few pins in. Leanne, if you're listening, throw a couple of pins in there with them. The last winner we had was Lisa Sig Sauer, and we need her address. So, Lisa, if you're watching this, send your address to us. But this week's winner is Cody Sandoff. So, Cody, you've got a Pond Boss hat coming, and a mug, and a couple of Pond Boss pins with a little stylus on the end. That's pretty cool. We just need your address. All right, so now, going back to Tim's question, you need to evaluate. And there's a good article coming up that tells you that, but I'm going to give you kind of the thumbnail sketch. You need to know the fish you have. So if you catch 1 5-pound bass and that's nothing else, start fishing a little bit differently. See if you can catch some bluegills, see if you can catch some sunfish. Identify what you've got. Or if you want to, if you don't mind spending the money, you can have the pond surveyed, you can have it analyzed. And then if you do that, then that helps us figure out what you've got. So if you know what you want, what your goals are, and we can figure out what you have, we can create a game plan to get you from where you are to where you want to be. That might mean stocking fish. It might mean culling fish. It might mean a feeding program. So there's a number of things you can do, but until you truly know the status of your fishery, it's hard to say this is what you need to do, especially when you've caught one fish. And if that's the only fish in there, it's easy. You start over. You take that fish out, you fillet it, eat it by candlelight, and start again. But odds are high that that's not the only fish in there. So we need to know what other fish you have. Kerry Martin's Herman Brothers deal. Actually, when I first read Daniel's question, I thought about that because the Hermans up in Peoria, Illinois, they're really unique guys. They had the TV show, I think it was called Lake Life for a while. I think it was on the DIY channel. But you could actually go sit down, and I see Bruce Condello checking in. And Bruce has been there, I've been there. They've got this really cool deal where you can put a scuba diving breathing device in your mouth, and they've got a low pressure air compressor on top and a hose. And you can actually, they've got levels under the dock where you can go sit. I think one of them is 5 feet deep, another one's like 8 feet deep. And you can go down there and you can feed fish. And the way they were actually discovered for the TV show was little brother Justin would take fathead minnows and put one in his mouth, wiggling like so, and a smallmouth bass would come up and eat it out of his mouth. And that's pretty cool because you can put on, scuba goggles and scuba mask and go down under there and watch the fish. And yeah, you're going to get bit by a bluegill, but it's going to weigh about a pound. All right, so now, look at there. There's Zach Russell checking in across the lake from our good buddy Jason over there. David Schneiderman. Hey, David's in the dock business. If you guys need a dock, check in with David. Marvin Dooley checking in from Southland. Hey, man, good to see you, Marvin. Been busy selling them Texas Hunter feeders. Boy, I know you do. The guys at Texas Hunter tell me about that. That's outstanding. I know you represent them well, and Marvin's been around a long time, and he knows what he's doing over there. Marvin needs to get you advertising in the magazine. Let's see, Alex Rue. I'm currently trying to manage a pond to increase the quantity of large-sized bass and crappie. The belief is that the pond is currently very overpopulated. The pond is around 6 to 7 acres with many structures for fish to hide in deep open water, as well as, I got to click on see more. Oh boy, there's a letter in here. Let's see, as well as a flooded area of woods around an acre. We did a 7.5-hour 2-person management harvest using artificial bait Caught and kept 170 crappie, 90% of which were 9 to 12 inches last week. We also caught roughly 55 bass, keeping 39 between 11 and 14 inches. These kinds of harvests have been happening 2 times a year, with basically the same number of crappie every time for 3 years now. This is the first year targeting a slot limit of bass. The owner of the pond has noticed a decline in trophy-sized fish being caught overall, while we are still catching the occasional trophy fish. The frequency of bass over 5 pounds or crappie over 16 inches has drastically declined over the last few years. My question is there a range of how many crappie and bass should I be trying to remove yearly to restore a healthy balance to the pond? Thank you for your help. Okay, guys, this topic is fine-tuning a pond, and this question fits right into that category. So, here's what I'm going to tell you. Of the crappie that you culled in that 9 to 12 inches, those 12 inchers are very likely your junior varsity to varsity players. And they're the ones, the 12 inchers stand the best chance to get to 16. Now, what you didn't say in here is anything about your food chain. Are there shiner minnows? Are there bluegills? What do they have in there? You know, it's a 6 or 7 acre pond, which is too small to expect a continual healthy crappie population. So while culling is a part of it, here's what I would do if I were going to fine tune this program. I would weigh and measure every one of those crappie and compare them to the standard weights for crappie. Just Google standard weights and find out if they're black crappie or white crappie. Here's the way to tell. If you'll count the hard spines on the dorsal fin, if there's 7 or more, it's a black crappie. If there's less than 7, it's a white crappie. So look at the standard length and weights charts for crappie and compare the weights of these crappie to that standard chart. And what that's going to tell you is which fish you need to be culling and which fish you need to be leaving. Now, on the largemouth bass, one thing I would want to know, I would age a few of those fish. Now, here's how you can age these fish and get kind of a fairly accurate idea. Pull 5 scales or 6 scales from along the lateral line of each one of these fish. Go to the drugstore first, buy some betadine, and get, when you get that betadine in a magnifying glass, put a little bit of betadine on each scale, and ideally, if you can flatten it between 2 glass slides off of a microscope, order those online, you can reuse them, just wash them, smash that little scale down flat with the dye in it, the betadine dyes it, and then count the rings. Count the rings on all 5 scales, divide it by 5, and that's pretty close to what the age is going to be. You're going to be within a year to a year and a half. I don't know where you are, what part of the planet you are, but I would be aging the fish, and then I would compare the lengths and weights to standards to the age. That's going to tell you which fish you need to be harvesting. If you've got some 12-inch crappie that are 2 years old, you're going to go one direction. If you've got some 12-inch crappie that are 7 years old, you're going to go another direction. And that's going to help you make the next management decision. Follow that up to be sure you've got the food chain to support those fish. You know, culling 170 crappie in a 7-acre lake, that's about 25 per acre. That's a substantial number to be culling. Well, part of the reason you're not getting growth is because you're taking the best fish that would be that big. Okay, because and another thing, if you really want to fine tune it, the fish that you release, tag them. And there's a great article in one. I think it's I don't know if it's in the May June. I think it's in the May June issue of Pond Boss. Let me see. Yeah, I think it is. Let me look here. Tagging fish. No, actually, you know what? That's got to be coming up. Yep, that's coming up in the next issue. Y'all need to get the July-August issue of Pond Boss. There's 2 articles in there that'll help you One of them is how and why to tag fish. That way you can track, if you tag some fish, then you can track individual growth rates, and you can also extrapolate how many fish you've got. So in other words, let's say you tag 100 fish, and you come back in and you catch 100, and 15 of them are tagged. So you tag the next 85, you put them back. You come back, you catch 100 fish, 35 are tagged. Now you're getting some numbers so you can extrapolate about how many bass you have or how many crappie you have. That's also going to help guide you as to how many fish you need to be harvesting. So I'd be looking at it that way. Holy cow, the comments are coming. Anybody else going to chime in for Daniel's question? Mike Cottrell caught mainly green sunfish last weekend. I didn't stock them, but when the feeder went off, Aquamax 500, they started feeding. I saw some good bass blowing up on them, but I've yet to catch a bluegill, and I stocked them and caught some bass. Do you think I should get some more bluegill to put in? Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you, Mike, is I don't remember when you stocked those bluegills, but if it's been less than about 3 months, don't assume they're gone. Just assume that the green sunfish are much, much more aggressive than the bluegill are, till the bluegill gets settled in, start growing some, find a niche, then they'll start coming to the feeder. I mean, I've got a pond right beside the house. They call it the swimming pond. Well, last fall, the fish were exploding on the feeder. Got cold, they quit. We were a little bit late getting the feeder going this year. Didn't see nearly the feeding activity that I expected. I pretty well assumed that otters cleaned me out over the winter when I wasn't paying attention, but now they're feeding like crazy. So they just had to kind of get readjusted and reacquainted and get going again. So, now, the question you asked is, should I get some more bluegill to put in? That won't do any harm at all. If you want to do that, do it. Just buy something big enough that your bass won't eat them. Now, when I hear you say some good bass blowing up on them, what that means to me is when the feeder goes off, you got green sunfish coming in the feeder and the bass are feeding on the green sunfish. Now, if you want to start feeding your bluegills, switch your feeder to a shallow area. Because what's going on is when the feeder goes off, the sunfish come up, they're vulnerable, they're going to get wiped out. Now, if you want to use that, this is another fine-tuning tip. Where you put your feeder and the kind of feed you use is going to help you fine-tune that fishery. So what I'm hearing here in my ears is that when Aquamax 500, Purina's good fish food, goes off into that lake and your sunfish start feeding, you're presuming that they're green sunfish and the bass are eating them. That's a good fine-tuning management strategy. Now, if they're eating bluegill and you don't want them to, that's when you change the feeder. Maybe turn it parallel to the shore, feeding shallower water. So think about that. Dion Myers, good deal. Alex Rue, subscribing today, good deal. Bruce Condello, John Krause, Derek Wolf, you guys have been on there for a while. I see Steve Snow. Steve's hanging out over there at Lake Graham. Trent Gunter, Dion Myers, Jimmy Martin. Let's see, Jimmy says, I'm trying to improve the quality of the bass in a 28-acre lake near Oakwood, Texas. I don't know where that is. Last year I took out 400 short, skinny fish, but we're not catching near as many fish this year. Is that an expected short-term outcome? Yeah, it is. It is. Now, 28 acres, help me do the math there. 28 times 10, so that's about 15 per acre. That is enough to affect catch rates, but it's also enough to affect growth rates. What that means is when you thin those skinny bass out, two things are going to happen. Two things that are real important. This is another pretty good topic. I'm glad you guys are asking all these questions because you're helping me do this fine-tuning thing. When you harvest 400 bass out of a skinny bass out of a 28-acre lake, then what you should expect to happen is that some of the existing fish that didn't get culled are going to grow bigger because you've thinned the herd enough that now you're going to get more food. Another thing that's happened is that now the fish that reproduce are going to come and fill that void. So you can get some younger fish coming up into that slot before long. So be ready for that. But one of the bigger things that may be going on that you want to think about is don't just wholesale harvest all the fish because they fit in that slot. Because you could be culling some of the most aggressive fish in the whole lake. That's real important to think about. So when you catch a fish, now listen to this, guys. This is fine-tuning, okay? Understand that aggression in a fish, making it want to bite your hook, is inherited. So if you catch a fish that's aggressive because it bit your hook and you throw it out, and you do that enough, you're going to decrease the catchability of the remaining fish because they're just not that aggressive. So when you catch a good-looking fish that bit exceptionally hard, maybe he's right on the cusp of average, throw it back. So that goes into where now you got to make a judgment call. You're the referee, dude. So when you catch that fish and you look at it and there's something about it, especially when you're culling as many as 400 fish, be more cognizant of fish that have a tendency to be real. If one hits hard, and even if it's 15% underweight, it may be just a male coming off the nest post-spawn, throw it back if it's aggressive. That way you can do that. Let's see, you can grow more fish. All right, now let's see. I have a group of friends coming up this weekend to thin out more. Yeah, I would change that removal criteria to that. Now, here's the problem. How do you explain that to your friends? You really can't. I tell you what, if you have live wells, put the fish in live wells. You inspect them. If they're broad across the shoulders, they're chunky deep, if they have a better body conformation than the rest of the fish, release them. And let's see, today is Wednesday. Why don't you go online and buy a tagging gun? You can buy a Floyd. Floyd's a good system. I think Herman Brothers sells tagging guns. Greg Grimes, he sells tagging guns. Get a tagging gun. And any fish that you release, tag it. Weigh it, measure it, the date, log that on a clipboard, put it on a piece of paper, stick it in a spreadsheet, and use it. I'll tell you this, subscribe to Pond Boss. Next issue is going to give you all the skinny on how to do that. Paul Picard, any way you can go to daylight savings time on the live show? I am on daylight savings time. I put Central Time, didn't I? Shut up. Okay, I'll change it. Took me a minute to catch on to you. Ryan Barrett, Paul Picard, I love you. You're always on the ball. You're watching those details. Wait a minute. I did put Central Daylight Time. What are you talking about, dude? What do you want to do this after dark? Stay up till midnight? No thanks. Connie Bingaman. We love Fred and Connie. Good to see you, Connie Bingaman. Debbie Bob Lusk, my girlfriend. My woman. Joseph Reynolds. Hey, Joe. Sheridan Ashmore. What is it about a blueback herring that affects a fishery? Does it improve a fishery or can it hurt the fishery? Oh, that's a fantastic question, Sheridan. It can hurt a fishery, but it can improve a fishery. Here's the thing about blueback herrings. Gizzard shad fit this same role. If you don't have enough top end predators to be the fish to manage blueback herrings or gizzard shad, then they could become overabundant and be detrimental to the pond. Now, blueback herring, they're pretty heavy plankton feeders, so they can completely disrupt your plankton bloom. So if you've got enough large predator fish, here's what I mean by that. I'll always stock gizzard shad into a trophy bass fishery once I'm confident that 25% of the biomass of largemouth bass are at least 18 inches or bigger. All right? And here's why. An 18-inch bass can eat a 10-inch gizzard shad. And those gizzard shad are going to go from 0 to 7 inches the first year. So I want to have enough bass big enough to eat the bigger gizzard shad that they can help control their numbers and the gizzard shad don't become a problem. Same principle follows with blueback herring, except for different reasons. Blueback herring can disrupt your plankton bloom by feeding heavily on zooplankton. Paul Jones. Hi, Paul Jones. Howdy from West Georgia. Enjoy listening to you. Are relative condition charts the same from state to state? Yes, they are. They sure are, Paul. Relative weights for crappie, for white crappie, are the same in Arkansas as they are in Iowa as they are in Georgia. So yes, they are. And I would use that. I would find those and go by them. And it's not hard to create a little XY graph where when you're weighing and measuring those fish, you can plot them onto an XY graph and see your trends. While you're in the boat weighing and measuring, you can judge each one of these individual fish on its own merit And that makes it an easy call individually. But what you need to see is you need to see the trends over time. So if you'll create an XY graph and plot that standard curve on there, and then weigh and measure enough fish over a year, 2 years, 3 years, you can see your trends. And when you see your, now crappie, here's the thing about crappie is they're really unpredictable. They're unpredictable spawners. They spawn first in warm water lakes every year. Now they don't spawn first in cold water lakes, but they spawn first in warm water lakes. So if you can start to see some trends and make it a little bit more predictable for you, then it's easier to decide what to cull and what not to cull. You know, and if you're really, for a 6 or 7 acre lake, like we were talking about earlier, it's a smart idea to budget some money to stock some bait fish from time to time to supplement. Let's see, Kevin Briggs checking in, Todd Austin, good to see you guys. Let's see here, Bill Russell, hi Bob from South Alabama, SA. Rick Perkins, hi Rick, good to see you, man. Jason Nepstad, if I tagged 100 bass in a 130 acre lake, what's the chance I would catch one later? Well, I'm going to tell you, Jason, you're going to have a greater chance of catching them than Zach. Oh, Zach, you need to chime in there, buddy. You know, I don't know the answer to that. It depends on how many fish you got. If you got 10,000 fish and you got a 1 in 1,000 chance to catch one, so that means you probably ought to tag 2,000 bass. But in a 130 acre lake, I'd be tagging as many bass as I can, especially the exceptional ones, because that's going to be pretty important. I would say, if you in a 130 acre lake, if you guys could tag 1,500 to 2,000 bass, you can get some good information from it. It's just, you know, it's like my old longtime buddy Cleon Allman says, sounds easy, does hard. You know, it takes a lot of work to do that. Oh, it looks like Jason is laughing at that comment about Zach. I hope Zach's still listening. Paul Picard wants to do it at 7:30. No, sorry, I'm not going to do it. I kind of make a little sacrifice to do it at 6:30. Of course, I guess we could all go to church. I don't know. When you think about it, probably not. Let's see. Michael Perkins, Indiana's turning into a pond or lake right now. Well, now's a good time to be in the pond management business in Indiana. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I know what's going on, man. I was all over the eastern side of Oklahoma and watched that Arkansas River spitting out all over the place in Arkansas and Oklahoma. It's tough. All right, let's see. Here comes Ron Ardoin from the South, Louisiana. Got a 3/4 acre pond, 2 years old, was stocked with 3,500 brim and 100 bass. I think 3,500 brim was too many for a 3 acre lake. Was this pond stocked overpopulated from the start? And what should we look for or do to prevent it from getting out of control? Okay, I'm going to assume that you're saying those fish were all stocked at the same time. 3,500 brim, how big were they? You know, okay, I tell you what, I'm going to make an assumption. I'm going to assume that the brim were 3,000 bluegill, 500 shell crackers. That's what I'm going to assume. And I'm going to assume they were small, 2 inches, 2.5 inches. If they were fed, then they grew really, really fast. If the bass were stocked at the same time, then the bass are going to catch up with them, but it may take a while. Now, here's what's going to happen if you got too many brim in a 3/4 acre pond, which that probably is too many. Although one side of my mouth is saying that and the other one doesn't want to say that because there's a lot of conditions with that. If they are overcrowded, here's what you're going to expect to happen. Don't expect heavy bluegill spawning because the young bluegill are going to be fighting with the big bluegill, and your reproduction, when you've got higher numbers, your reproduction is usually lower. Don't expect much successful reproduction from the largemouth bass. So if that's the case, then what I would do is I would be monitoring my largemouth bass. Now, if there are no bass, stock some bass that are young, that are 10 to 12 inches long, probably need 50 at the most. Then monitor their growth rates. And if you don't see recruiting classes, start culling some bass. Culling some bluegills, which in a 3/4 acre pond, you can make one seine pool and catch 2/3 of the fish. Start feeding them in an area, and I know you're wanting to be in the pond management business. Actually, I think you are in the pond management business. You can start culling some of those bluegill and go sell them to somebody else. So that's the way I look at it. I look at possibly culling some bluegills, especially if they're fed, add some bass until you start to see some reproduction. The good news is 3/4 of an acre is not very big. It's easy to manage. You can change it in one day if you got the right tools. Jimmy Martin, thanks, Bob. Been a subscriber for 10 plus years, but only recently had the time to get serious about my lake management. Rock and roll, man. I'm proud for you. That's great, Jimmy. If we can help you, you know, guys, keep in mind that I'm also in the lake management business. So if any of you guys need some help with it, I'm happy to do that. Uh-oh. Zach got his feelings hurt. That's just hurtful, Bob. Well, we got to laugh at it. We don't like to laugh at you. We like to laugh with you because we know you're our friend, right, Zach? Hey, Zach, you're our friend, right? Yep, okay. See, the thing, here's what everybody's doesn't know is Zach and Jason are buddies and they're co-conspirators on trying to figure out how to manage this beautiful 130-acre residential lake in the city limits of Fayetteville and North Kakalaka. So they're really fighting a good battle, and they're friendly rivals. They don't fish in the same boat because one will knock the other one in the lake. So let's see. Ron says the brim were stocked in December, bass stocked in July. Odds could be that those bass, if they were stocked as fingerlings, they could have been eaten if they were fingerlings. Now, if that's the case, if you're not seeing a good return on bass numbers, then I'd be stocking some bigger bass. Stock some bass big enough to eat the average size bluegill. Listen to this. This is important. Stock bass big enough to eat the average size bluegill in the pond. Don't stock bass big enough to eat the biggest bluegill. Stock bass big enough to eat the next size down. So if the biggest bluegill stocked in December in South Louisiana are now 4 to 6 inches long, the biggest ones are 6s, stock bass big enough to eat a 4-inch bluegill, and that's going to be 12-inch bass. Stock 50 of those. Okay, Tuesday Tucker checking in from the Caribbean, from the islands. Let's see what Zach's got to scroll down here and see what Zach said. But ask Jason who had to catch him a bluegill the other day. Uh-oh. I bet I know the answer to that. Lindsay Backshee's checking in. That's the mother of my grandchildren. That's my girl. That's my daughter, Lindsay. Kevin Briggs, always enjoy the show. Thanks, Kevin. Hey, you know, I know some of you guys are deeply serious about your pond management stuff. In the next issue of Pond Boss, I've got a little article I've written. And you know, Chris Blood with Texas Hunter tells me this. You know, my wife tells me this. Some of my best buddies tell me this. Bob, you don't promote yourself enough. I'm not comfortable doing that. I'm just not. I figure if I'm good at what I do, you're going to figure it out and you're going to want to play. That's the way I see things. And I've built my business over the years off of referrals. There's Troy Young. Troy Young used to work at the Wagner Ranch before it sold years ago. I helped Troy with pond management. Helped Troy get an electrofishing boat years ago. You know, so referrals is what I'm looking for. Let's see, Bruce says, if a person has a small body of water with stunted white crappie and can subsequently stock black crappie, sometimes you can get a foothold and possibly, that's a good idea. So going back to that 6-7 acre lake, here's what Bruce is saying. Identify your crappie. If you've got white crappie, trade up. Get those numbers down. You're going to have crappie. You might as well have black crappie because they don't reproduce quite as much and they get bigger. So that's what Bruce is telling us right here. So that's good, Bruce. We're what I was talking about just before is back in February I sold the pond management division of Bob Lusk Outdoors to American Sportfish Hatchery. So when I did that, you know, I sold my accounts, my assets, my employees went to work for a new company and they're all excited about it, and I sold my income. So now I'm figuring out how to create a different income. Well, one of those things I'm going to do is I had this idea back in 2004, right before our house burned down, which made me put this on the back burner, so to speak. I don't need to be making fun of that, but it's kind of funny. I wanted to do the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. So now I have planned those. Now it's not cheap, but you get 40 years worth of me and some experiences that you've never had before, and we're going to have limited space. So we're going to have 12 to 15 slots for people. There's going to be one session in October, I think 2 through 4. No, that ain't right. I forget. We got one in the fall in October, one in the spring in March, where we're going to have a little bit of classroom time. You're going to stay with me and Debbie at our house. I'm going to take you to a premier property to take a field trip to do electrofishing, set gill nets, trammel nets, fight nets, seine pools, harvest hatchery ponds, You're going to identify a bunch of fish you've never seen before. You're going to handle more fish than you've ever seen. You're going to identify plants. You're going to learn how to come in and evaluate. Not only evaluate, but figure out what it all means. Like Troy's watching this. I can remember talking to Troy 15 years ago, and they had an electrofishing boat. And they ended up mainly using that electrofishing boat to move fish from one lake to another, because there's like 500 lakes and ponds on that giant 500,000 acre ranch. But what they were having a hard time figuring out, Troy and the guy before him, was when they were collecting data, what did it mean? You know, if they caught 500 bluegill that were all one size and 200 bass that were all one size, what did it mean? So one of the things we're going to do in this in-depth, hands-on, 2.5-day seminar, actually 3 days for most people, is you're going to learn the proper ways to collect information. You're going to get wet. You're going to eat great food. I'm a pretty good cook. And you're going to learn how to collect that data and how to interpret it. And we're going to go deeper than what you see online and what you oftentimes see in Pond Boss, what you see at a general seminar. I'm going to take you into the depths of my 40 years worth of doing this stuff. And I've learned a lot, and I'm excited to share it. I'm not comfortable bragging about it, but what I am comfortable doing is sharing what I know. So I want to share that with you. Now here, buckle up, okay? It's $1,500. Now for $1,500, you're going to spend 2.5 days at our house, actually 3 days, because I'm going to start it with a basic pond management full-day seminar at the beginning, and then 2.5 days of some really if you're coming, it will. If you're coming, it will. Heck yeah, man. If Bruce Condello comes, we will do infused bourbon, I promise. So anyway, there'll be information about that in the upcoming issue of Pond Boss Magazine, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for letting me share that. I'm not real comfortable talking about myself, but I do know a lot of things you don't, and I'd love to share that and get that out there in front of the whole world. So here's who needs to come to that. If you're thinking about getting into the pond management business, if you own property and you really want to dig down deeper into being a better steward of your water, we're going to be talking about water quality. We're going to be doing water chemistry for dummies. We're going to be assessing how the water chemistry affects the fishery. We're going to be figuring out the different fisheries in these different bodies of water to where you're comfortable knowing and understanding why that is as it is. We're going to do a lot of fish identification, and I'm going to start collecting a few fish over the next few months that you may not get to see. You know, like Jason Nepstad's got white catfish in that lake. You don't see those very often, you know, so pretty dadgum cool. So we're going to really dig into the depths of pond and lake management, and you're going to go away with things that you're not even going to know you were going to get. You're also going to get a shirt. You're going to get a little pond management toolkit that's going to have a Secchi disc, a digital thermometer, an alkalinity test kit, a pH test kit, and whatever other goodies that I can think of to put in that little pond management kit for you to use. And 3 nights and 2 days at our house. And that's really fun, I promise you. Debbie and I built that place so we could share. And we share it a lot. Now it's time to share it with you and help the Lusk household income a little bit. Bruce says it's 2 to 3 days at Lusk Lodge would be worth the $1,500 even without the extensive pond learning. Thanks, Bruce. You've been there, so you know what it's like. It's really fun. Okay, enough about me. Enough about us. We're going to have limited space, so if you want it, call the office and let the guys know. And Ron Arduin, I'm ready for the pond. I think Ron's going to be one of the guys coming. At least he told me that on the phone the other day, so I'm looking forward to meeting Ron and hanging out, because Ron's been asking some pretty in-depth questions. I need to send him a bill. Wink, wink. No, so now we're going to talk some more about some of the fine-tuning of ponds. So hit me with some more questions. Here's what I'm going to tell you. One of the topics that I had for tonight on fine-tuning your pond and lake. It all starts with the water. If your water's not healthy, your fish are not going to be healthy. If your water struggles, your fish are going to struggle. You got to have happy water. People make fun of me for saying that, but you got to have happy water. Now let me tell you what that means. Here's how you can fine-tune your water. This time of year, matter of fact, I got to talking to Kenny Backus again. I'm getting texts from him almost every day. he fertilized his lake every year, ended up feeding the bushy pondweed. Well, finally this year he got a bloom. Now he over-fertilized a little bit probably. However, he's been getting some flushing with rainfall, so that's helpful. But what he ended up with was an 18-inch plankton bloom that he's not used to. And now he's starting to see some dead planktonic algae floating on top of the water. Well, here's what's going on when you have a real heavy plankton bloom going into the dog days of summer. Now in the spring, it's not as profound as it is in the summer. In the summer, we got longer days than we did in the spring. You know, we got the summer solstice coming up here in a few days. A couple of days, actually. Day after tomorrow, I think, is summer solstice. That's it, where we have the longest day of the year. So what happens when you have that much daylight, you have that much photosynthesis, which means when you have a heavy algae bloom like that, heavy plankton bloom, oxygen levels go up drastically during the day. When it gets dark, then they drop. So what's going on in Kenny's Lake right now, he's getting probably 12 to 13 parts per million dissolved oxygen about this time of day. Then in the morning it drops down to probably about 6. Well, the water's affinity for oxygen at 78 degrees right now is about 7 parts per million, which is 85% saturation. Now that's a whole lot of science to say this. The plankton is producing more oxygen than the water can relieve itself of during the day. And then it gets back to normal during the night. But when you've got such a spike going up and down every day, then that's a little bit stressful on the fish because their metabolism, their pathology, the way their bodies operate, they're having to adjust to that. So when they're having to adjust, they're not thriving like they could. So if you can figure out a way to bring those two things closer together, then you're going to have a more successful fine-tuning of the water. Now, how do you do that? Well, you can manage your plankton bloom. So if you've got a really heavy green bloom, you can inoculate with some Daphnia. Go to a pond that's olive green, get some water, put that water in your pond, look at it and see. Look at it and see what you got. Now, you know, I could probably get slam dunked for making that statement, but if you got another pond on your property and it's a different color green, go get a glass jar of it. Get a mason jar, look at it. If you see little critters swimming around in it, go stock them in that lake that's really green. Or you can use an algicide to dilute the bloom a little bit. You can do that. Or you can stock threadfin shad and they're going to feed on it. You know, so, where Carrie Martin's sitting here saying, oh, talk about aeration. You can aerate. Now, if you're going to aerate this time of year and you're just thinking about buying a system, do your homework. Talk to a pro. Buy the right size system for your lake. Don't put it in the deepest water. Use a diffused aeration system or do like Bruce used to use, and Bruce does now. He's got a circulator. Now, what Bruce used to have, he's got a circulator now that picks water up and churns it at the surface, but he used to have a horizontal circulator that looked like a kind of a small industrial fan that would have a plate or a little cone around it, and it would push water like a propeller and push water and create a horizontal current or a diagonal current. So think about moving the water, and that way you can help stabilize the water. That's one of the fun things. All right, Troy Young, gotta go, hanging out in Jamaica. I saw your pictures on Facebook, dude. Thanks for checking in, man. Call me when you get back, and we'll go spend a little time together when I'm coming through Fort Worth. So there's Tom Blasdell. Sorry I'm late. That's okay. We're gonna wrap up here in just a few minutes. Gary Hempel, howdy, Gary Hempel. So one of the fine-tuning things you can do is like what Bruce is doing right now. I was at Bruce's place last week, and matter of fact, I'm going to be there a week after next. Bruce, we need to talk about getting you on the show a week after Wednesday. We've got to have a good internet connection. You know, I'd love to do it on your dock, but I don't think we have a good internet connection, and my phone doesn't work down there very good. So we need to talk about that. And we'll get you on the show and talk about some of the tactics that you're using to grow some huge fish. So I think that'd be kind of fun. I'll get on the phone with you here in a couple of days and we'll talk about that. But what Bruce does is he uses a circulator that's picking water up probably 3 feet deep and then churning it in a this kind of a small mushroom shaped it's not bubbles, it's just like a little fountain is what it looks like. It doesn't even blow water up 3 feet high. But what it's doing is it's creating a mushroom effect, causing that water to circulate vertically and horizontally. And that's helping him mitigate his bloom and mitigate, and running that circulator through the day helps the water get rid of the excess oxygen, and then running it all night helps keep the oxygen from spiking too low in the morning. So that's a smart way to help fine-tune your waters, and he's got it fairly close to his dock, and a lot of fish are coming around his dock. Plus he's got cages where he's got fish in. So let's see, Zach kind of got past the hurt feelings, and he's already thrown Jason in the water once tonight. What are the effects of the water clarity shifting from about 3 feet to close to 6 inches after heavy rain and slowly clearing over about a week just to get muddy the next rain? I've noticed the feeding response is diminished when it's darker water, but is there any other adverse effects that the runoff may be causing? No, not really. When you've got 3 foot of visibility, of course, the majority of the fish that you've got are sight feeders. So it's hard. A fish is conditioned to its environment by repetitive behaviors. So one of the fine-tuning things that you guys can do in your pond, like for example, if you're feed the same place, same time every day, and you're going to get a conditioned response. So even when the water's muddy and you're still feeding, the fish should come to it. But when fish are sight feeders, they can't change their conditioning in just 1 or 2 or 3 days. So if they're used to the water being 3 feet of clarity and then it goes to 6 inches, they're not going to respond to that unless the water stays muddy. And then the fish that are going to respond to that are the ones that can figure out how to use their lateral eyes to detect movement better than using their eyes. Be a totally different batch of fish. Think about that a minute. That's a pretty big deal, what I just said. The fish that are doing the best in 3 feet of water are using their vision. Fish that will do best in water that's 6 inches of visibility have to detect a movement without seeing it. That's a conditioned response. The term for that's plasticity. That's fish adjusting to their environment. Fish adjust in a creek differently than they adjust in a river, which adjusts different than in a reservoir, which adjusts different in clear water, which adjusts different than muddy water. So one of the fine-tuning things is the more consistent you can keep your water quality and your water chemistry, the more consistent your fish are going to be able to thrive. So when you're fine-tuning, what you're trying to do is create stability. That's what you want. Create stability with reproduction. Make sure you got spawning beds, feeding consistently, move your water, harvest fish thoughtfully. Those are the fine-tuning things. Bruce says that surface aerator is a less risky option if you're already having early summer oxygen fluctuations. It serves a refuge of higher O2 levels during the night, early morning especially. I totally see that. But what it also does is when you have a pretty decent plankton bloom like you've got, it's also getting rid of the supersaturation potential. So in other words, during the daytime when a lake has got a good bloom like that, and Bruce's bloom is mature. It's more of an olive brown green with more zooplankton in it, but it's still photosynthesizing. So if it does have the potential to go to supersaturation, then this diffuser, the surface aerator he's got, minimizes that risk. Because that's a really good way to fine tune a pond, is with that. Chris Ketchum, good to see you, buddy. I've spent some time with Chris. Chris is an outstanding angler and lives locally, and asked him when I first saw him, I thought his name Ketchum was a handle, but it's not. That's his name. Chris Ketchum knows how to catch them. Tom Blasdale, I'm working on a Japanese beetle trap fish feeder this weekend. Now, see, I love creative stuff like that. I absolutely love that. If you can attract Japanese beetles into a trap to feed your fish, home run, especially if the fish will eat them and grow on them. So I love that. Actually, one thing I did a long time ago, which it was a pain in the neck, but I built a tray over a pond. And when I very first went into the fisheries business, it was at a catfish farm, and we cleaned a lot of fish where people would come in and say, I want that fish, that fish, that fish. We net them up, electrocute them in a little homemade device. It's kind of fun. And then we butcher those fish for them. Then we'd have the offals. We'd have the head, the guts. Sometimes if we filleted them, we'd have the carcass. Well, at the end of the day, I had 3 of these trays. And at the end of the day, I'd take the fish guts and I'd go put them on top of this tray. And the next 2 or 3 days, they were covered in maggots. And I had hardware cloth that was about ½ an inch. So the maggots would crawl around a little bit and then fall off the tray and feed the fish beneath it. And I saw some, and I'd had that over one of the ponds I had was some largemouth bass. And I'm convinced that our survival, I didn't know enough about it back then, but I'm convinced our baby largemouth bass survival rates were higher in that pond because they were feeding on maggots. Can't believe I'm saying this live, but I am. Chris said, that would be really cool, Tom. I'm working on a floating turtle trap. Yeah, that's cool. Tom, when you do that, take pictures. And if it works good, I'll publish it in Pond Boss Magazine. By the way, if y'all don't know about Pond Boss Magazine, here it is right here. $35 a year, full of all kinds of nuggets. And if you're going to start a subscription, the next issue is perfect. It's got an article on do-it-yourself pond management, why to tag bass, how to tag bass, crappie, bluegill, whatever you want to tag. It talks about tagging fish. So it's really, really good. Let's see here. Jason Nipstad, it's hard to enjoy the lake in the evenings due to vampire mosquitoes on the attack. There is, you know what, Jason? Go to the feed store and buy Spartan mosquito something. Look up Spartan mosquito deal. We've had so much rain this year that even going out on our back porch, we couldn't do it. And then I found out about these Spartan mosquito attractors, and we went and bought 4 of them. I think 2 for $20. We spent $40. Within 10 days, we noticed a significant difference in mosquitoes, and they're gone. And we're continually having rain. I mean, we're under a tornado watch right now. And there's rain to the south of us, rain to the west of us, rain to the northwest of us. But that device is really, really worth it. So you know what, 7:27. I don't know how it happens, but these hours seem to fly by. You guys asked some great questions, some thoughtful questions. I love it. Thermacell does, yeah, he's right. Mike Cottrell, Thermacell does a great job, especially up close. These Spartan mosquito eradicators, that's it, Spartan mosquito eradicators. You fill them with water, hang them in trees. They're full of yeast. They create carbon dioxide. They get something in them that's got to be proprietary that I think sterilizes them where they can't breed. Breeding population quits, the numbers drop. So we put them around the perimeter of our house, and we're covered in water, and we're covered in trees. The trees have crotches. The crotches have water. We've got mosquitoes. So, in July, August, they're usually gone, but right now we've had them. I put 4 of them out there about 20 days ago. Mosquitoes are rare. Let's see, Zach Russell, I believe a gentleman talked about it on the another episode, but I didn't quite catch it. But have you ever taken cold fish and used them for feed? I've thought about chopping them up and drying them out and feeding them. Yeah, Bruce does that. And it really, really works. Now, what you got to be careful about is how you do it. I think the method, you don't just wholesale go fillet fish, cut them up, and then throw them out there and expect the fish to eat them. Put a little method behind it. Condition some fish to come up and eat what you have to offer. Because if not, then you're going to attract carp. You're going to attract gar, which you have. You're going to attract white catfish. So you can drown them out. I don't know that the fish would eat them dried, but you can fillet them, cut them up into little big chunks and freeze them and use them like that. So and if Bruce can join me on the show a week from next Wednesday, then we'll talk about that. Yeah, Kevin Briggs, yellow flies are horrible here. I saw you posting a picture of yellow flies. I don't know what to do about those. Those dadgum deer flies bite a hole in your head. We get those some too. All right, so Ron Ardwin, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Okay, guys, it's time to tune it out. So I want to thank you. $35 a year, Pond Boss Magazine. Thanks for hanging out. You guys are the best. You ask great questions, and it's a thrill to be able to spend time with you. And thanks for hanging out with me this amount of time tonight. I deeply appreciate it. So until next Wednesday, I'll say adios to you guys. Thanks for checking in. See you.